The moment was unlike anything television had ever captured. Denzel Washington, respected actor, global icon, a man who's portrayed generals and freedom fighters with grace and grit, was sitting on the bright set of a late-night show in Los Angeles. The audience, expecting jokes and movie promos, was suddenly hushed. The studio lights felt too bright, too loud. Then came the call. The screen behind him flickered. A flag appeared, red, green, and gold. Then a face, young, proud, intense. A quiet strength behind the eyes. "I greet you, Mr. Washington," the voice said in careful English, touched with the music of French. "This is Ibrahim Traoré, President of Burkina Faso." Gasps rippled through the room. The host's smile faltered. Denzel leaned forward, eyes narrowing in disbelief. "You don't know me, sir," Traoré continued, "but you changed the course of my life." What followed next shook the world. Traoré's voice grew deeper, slower. He spoke of his childhood, barefoot in a village where hunger had a name, and dreams had to fight for space. He spoke of the day he saw Glory, Denzel's film. How, in the shadows of a flickering screen, a 14-year-old African boy saw a black man cry, not out of weakness, but out of power, standing tall against injustice. Denzel's face began to crack. "I became the man I am because I saw the fire in your eyes," the president said. "Your strength became my blueprint for courage." Tears welled in Denzel's eyes. His lips trembled. His hands shook as he clutched the arms of the chair. Then came the final words. "We do not forget those who save our souls," said Traoré. "So I speak not just as a president, but as your brother. I invite you to Burkina Faso not for a ceremony, but for something far deeper. I want to name our new national leadership school after you." The silence broke. Denzel wept, openly, uncontrollably, on live television. Millions watching saw not the actor, but the man. A human soul undone by truth, connection, and unexpected grace. And that was only the beginning. If this moment stirred something in you, like this video, share it with someone who needs to believe in the power of one voice. And if you believe Africa is rising, subscribe. This story isn't just about a movie star. It's about resistance, sacrifice, and forgotten leadership. It started like any other night. A packed studio. Flashing lights. The theme song blasting from the speakers. The host, charming and sarcastic, greeted the crowd with jokes. People clapped. Denzel walked out smiling, calm, polished in a navy suit. Charisma in his stride. He sat down, ready for another friendly interview, another press run. But something was off. Behind the practiced smile, there was a stillness in his eyes. Like his soul was somewhere far away. And indeed it was. What no one knew, what Denzel himself didn't yet know, was that halfway across the world, a revolutionary leader was preparing to dial his number. A man who didn't belong to fame or red carpets. A man fighting every day against betrayal, against bullets, against the weight of foreign hands gripping his country's throat. Ibrahim Traoré had come to power not with votes, but with will, the will of young soldiers and angry farmers and mothers who had buried too many sons. He was 34. A captain. A student of physics. A believer in sovereignty and soil. But he was also a hunted man. Western diplomats called him unstable. News networks said he was young and dangerous. His refusal to bow to foreign interest had made him an enemy of the old world order. Intelligence briefings whispered of coups, assassins, and sabotage. Every night, he slept with one ear open. Every day, he smiled in the face of leaders who wanted him gone. Yet he stood. Not because he was unafraid, but because he remembered. He remembered the sound of boots in the mud of his village. He remembered hunger so sharp it made you dizzy. He remembered the night many years ago when he and a group of other boys had crowded around a dusty projector to watch an old American film, Glory, brought in by a Catholic priest who didn't know its power. And he remembered that one soldier, the one with fire in his voice. The one who shouted, who cried, who stood in chains and still refused to kneel. Denzel Washington. From that night on, Traoré had written the name Denzel in the margins of his school notebooks. Not as a star, but as an idea. A vision of how a black man could resist, speak, and lead. So, when he became president, against every odd, every threat, he remembered the spark. The world was watching his military strategy. But inside, he was still that boy with dust on his feet and fire in his chest. And then, the world shifted. Traoré had learned that Denzel was scheduled for a late-night interview to promote his next film. A chance came, one satellite connection, one secure channel. Just one call. And so, he made it. Not for publicity. Not for politics. But for truth. If one story can cross oceans and plant courage in a boy's chest, he said to his advisors, then that story deserves to hear what it gave birth to. And so it began. A satellite delay. A stunned studio. A speech that would ripple from television screens to village huts to government halls. And a man, Denzel Washington, facing a truth he never expected, that a film role years ago had helped shape the backbone of a revolution. What came after was even more staggering. The call ended, but the journey was just beginning. Because by morning, Denzel was booking a flight. No PR team. No press release. Just one man, a small backpack, and a heart full of questions. He whispered just before boarding, I don't know what I'm walking into, but I know I have to go. If this message resonates with you, take a second to like this video. Share this with someone who believes change is possible, no matter how small their voice may feel. And subscribe if you believe the time for Africa to rise is now. Burkina Faso was still waking up when Denzel's plane broke through the clouds. There were no red carpets waiting. No flashbulbs. No reporters crowding the tarmac. Just silence. And a single black SUV parked beside a rusted fence. One man stood beside it, simple gray shirt, no military badges, no speeches. It was him, Ibrahim Traoré. Their eyes met for the first time, and for a moment, the air between them felt thick with something ancient. Something shared. They didn't shake hands. They embraced. Not as president and actor, but as brothers. I'm honored you came, Traoré said softly. I didn't come as a star, Denzel replied. I came as a man who finally understands the weight of his voice. The SUV rumbled down dusty roads. Through neighborhoods made of sun-worn clay and corrugated roofs. Children ran barefoot, waving at the car. They didn't know who was inside. They didn't need to. Denzel sat in silence, the president beside him, both men lost in thought. Then Traoré spoke, almost in a whisper. There's someone I want you to meet. The person who gave me everything when I had nothing. The car stopped at a modest village. No gates. No guards. Just a crumbling school and a cluster of children drawing pictures in the dirt with sticks. And there she was. But proud. Holding a broom. Sweeping dust like she had for 40 years. Her back was curved, her apron faded, her face marked with lines of time and sacrifice. Mama Hawa, the president whispered. She looked up. Her eyes widened. Ibrahim. She dropped the broom. He ran into her arms like a boy, not a leader of a nation. He wept. She cradled his face, humming the lullaby she used to sing when his belly growled from hunger. And then, slowly, her eyes moved to Denzel. You're him, she whispered, reaching out to touch his face. You were in that movie, the one he couldn't stop talking about. Denzel said nothing. His throat was tight. All he could do was kneel. In that dusty courtyard, time froze. 3 people from 3 different worlds sat beneath a baobab tree, an old woman with calloused hands, a soldier turned president, and a man whose face had once been a symbol on a flickering screen. The air buzzed with something more powerful than history. I was just a boy, Traoré said. But she made me believe I was already something. Even when the world called me nothing. Mama Hawa smiled, reached into her apron, and pulled out a folded piece of paper, old, yellowed, nearly falling apart. I kept this, she said, since the day he gave it to me. It was a letter. A child's handwriting. One day I will be a leader. I will find you, Mama. I promise. Traoré gasped. Denzel covered his mouth. Tears fell, not because of sadness, but because of truth, the kind of truth that humbles you. The kind that reminds you that real power grows in silence, in kitchens, in small sacrifices made without witnesses. If this story touches you, Denzel finally said, looking at her, the world needs to hear it. You deserve more than dust and broomsticks. She shook her head. I don't need anything. I only wanted him to remember who he is. That night, back at the presidential palace, Ibrahim led Denzel down a quiet hallway. No security. No aides. At the end was a heavy wooden door. Inside, a small room filled with journals, maps, photos. This is where I dream, Traoré said. Not in the parliament. Here. On one wall was a photo of a young boy smiling beside an old woman, Mama Hawa, lifting him up so he could reach a mango tree. This is my treasure, he whispered. Denzel looked around. He saw no gold, no medals. Just memories and promises. You lead like a son who remembers love, Denzel said. The world rarely sees that kind of power. I want to build something that outlives both of us, Traoré said. Something that carries her name. A school. A garden. A future. And Denzel, his voice hoarse, his eyes red, nodded. Let's give her the honor she never asked for. If you believe mothers like Mama Hawa are the true builders of nations, take a moment right now. Like this video. Share it with someone whose mother made something from nothing. And if you know a child who dreams big in the shadows, subscribe. They need to know they're not alone. The next afternoon, they returned to the school. No fanfare. No speeches. Just the village, the children, and one velvet box. President Traoré knelt before her. For your service to this nation, he said, voice trembling, as a mother, a teacher, and a guardian of hope. Inside the box, a golden medallion, her name engraved beside the national seal. The children clapped. The teachers wept. Denzel stepped forward and pulled out an envelope. I spoke to my producers this morning, he said. Your story will become a film. Every dollar from it will go toward building schools in your name. Mama Hawa fell to her knees, hands trembling. She had spent her whole life giving. And now, she was receiving. But fate had one more turn. 3 days later, Denzel stood again on live television, this time back in Los Angeles. The host grinned, expecting light banter. Instead, Denzel whispered, "Can I take a call?" The studio blinked. The screen lit up. There was President Traoré, and beside him, Mama Hawa. The audience gasped. You reminded the world, Traoré said, that even the loudest voices must sometimes listen. And Mama Hawa, her voice shaking, whispered, "Thank you, my son." Denzel broke. On live TV. Hands trembling, head bowed. The world watched in silence. And then the tears came, raw, unstoppable. The screen faded to black. But the story was not over. If you believe in honoring the forgotten heroes, like Mama Hawa, take a moment now. Like this video. Share it with someone who raised you, loved you, or held you up when you couldn't stand, and subscribe, because what happens next will echo across continents. Mama Hawa's name was now on everyone's lips. From Paris to Pretoria, from church pulpits in Harlem to radio stations in Ghana, her face became a symbol, not of fame, but of faith, the kind that keeps loving in silence, even when the world doesn't clap. Social media exploded. A simple GoFundMe started by one of her former students aimed to raise $10,000 to repair the village school. It passed $1 million in 2 hours. Donations came with messages like, "She raised more than a president, she raised all of us." But while the world celebrated, Mama Hawa's body was fading. She had smiled for days, hugged dozens, shared her story on calls and camera screens. But her bones were tired. Her eyes were heavy. The quiet parts of her, her spirit, her breath, were growing still. On the 6th day after Denzel's arrival, she asked to speak with him and Ibrahim privately. They entered her small room. No press. No lights. Just cracked walls, the smell of shea butter, and 3 chairs. "I'm old," she whispered, her voice gentle but steady. "I won't see next planting season." They tried to argue, to comfort her, but she raised her hand. "I'm not afraid. My only wish is that no child in Burkina Faso ever goes to school hungry." A tear slid down Traoré's cheek. She turned to Denzel. You tell stories that reach people. You make them feel. Tell this one. And don't let it be forgotten. Then she pulled something from under her pillow. A scarf, faded, torn, hand-stitched with care. The one little Ibrahim used to tie around her arm when he played president in the yard. She placed it in his hands. My first medal, she smiled. Take care of each other. That was the last thing she said. They held her hand until her eyes closed for the final time. The sun outside was rising. So was her legacy. President Traoré stood beside her bed, still holding the scarf like it was made of gold. Denzel knelt at her feet, his head bowed, shoulders shaking. She gave me everything when I had nothing, Traoré whispered. Now I must give everything back. Outside, word spread like wind through tall grass. The villagers somehow knew. Children stopped playing. Elders pressed hands to their chests. A silence fell across the village like a blanket of mourning. That evening, Traoré addressed the nation. We will build something in her name, he said. Not to honor death, but to raise life. A school. A garden. A future. Denzel, eyes swollen from crying, stood beside him and said only one sentence. I've played kings and generals. But today I serve a mother. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over Burkina Faso. In the center of the village, a simple wooden casket rested on a woven mat. No gold. No velvet ropes. Just flowers. Drums. Traoré walked behind it, alone, carrying the scarf. Denzel followed quietly, his suit wrinkled from sleep, his heart wide open. There were no speeches. No reporters. But something sacred filled the air. At the burial, as the casket was lowered, a small bird landed on the edge of the grave and did not move. The crowd gasped. Some said it was her spirit. Others just wept. Then Denzel stepped forward. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a necklace. This belonged to my father, he whispered. Strong. Quiet. Never asked for anything. He placed it gently on the casket. Goodbye, Mama. Even the cameras turned away. Some things are too sacred for screens. That night, Traoré and Denzel sat under the stars on a straw mat. A fire crackled between them. Neither man spoke. They didn't need to. Then Traoré said, This week I remembered who I am. Denzel nodded slowly. Me too. And in that silence, a pact was born. Not signed in ink, but sealed in grief, love, and resolve. Within days, the Mama Hawa Foundation was announced. Its mission, feed, educate, and heal rural children across Burkina Faso and beyond. Denzel committed his next year's salary to its launch. But the most powerful moment came quietly. Before leaving Africa, Denzel filmed one short video. He looked directly into the camera. If one woman in a forgotten village can raise a president, he said, and change the heart of a man like me, what are we waiting for? The video went viral, 100 million views in 24 hours. A week later, Denzel returned to the US quietly. No press. But one final TV interview had already been scheduled. This time he made one request, no script. Let me speak from my heart. The set was bright. The host smiled wide. But when he asked, Denzel, what's one moment that changed your soul? Everything changed. Denzel didn't speak. He reached into his coat and pulled out the scarf. Then he held up his phone. Played a voice note. Traoré's voice echoed through the studio. Thank you for honoring a woman the world forgot, but who made a man the world remembers. Denzel broke. No music. No laughter. Just one man sobbing, clutching a scarf that had once wrapped the wrist of a boy playing president. That clip became the most shared video of the year. People around the world paused their lives to cry. Letters poured in. This made me call my mom. This made me forgive my grandmother. Who is Ibrahim Traoré? The world needs more leaders like him. Across Africa, stories of forgotten mothers surfaced. In America, youth groups held candlelight vigils for Mama Hawa. In Burkina Faso, something strange began to happen. Children started writing letters. Not to Santa. Not to influencers. But to President Traoré. One said, If I study hard like you, will I also make my mother proud? And then, without press or speeches, a statue appeared. A woman, holding a child's hand, a scarf around her wrist. Below it a bronze plaque. To Mama Hawa, the mother of all leaders. Denzel and Traoré stood before it with candles. They said nothing, because some endings are too holy for words. If this story touched your soul, don't scroll past. Like this video if you believe the world needs more Mama Hawas. Subscribe and share if you believe the time for Africa's rise isn't tomorrow, it's now. And in the comments below, write the name of the woman who raised you, held you, or made you brave. Let the world know her name. Greatness isn't in trophies. It's in the hands that fed us before we could feed ourselves. It's in the ones who loved us long before the world noticed us. And sometimes, it takes one phone call to remind us who we really are. Thank you for watching.